On behalf of the Vice Rector for Science, Professor Konrad Szocik, I am honored to welcome you all to today's online lecture, which is part of our open lecture series featuring distinguished experts from around the world. The series brings together leading scholars to discuss critical topics related to climate change, artificial intelligence, and planetary awareness. Today, we have the great privilege of hosting Professor Barry Smith, a renowned philosopher and ontologist. So let me introduce Professor Smith. He is a distinguished Julian Park Professor of Philosophy and Professor of Biomedical Informatics, Computer Science and Neurology at the University at Buffalo. Professor Smith is also the Director of the National Center for Ontological Research. His pioneering work in applied ontology has significantly influenced various fields, including biomedical informatics and artificial intelligence. He is the lead developer of the basic formal ontology, which has become an international standard and is widely adopted in scientific and industrial applications. Professor Smith has authored over 700 publications and is recognized as one of the most widely cited living philosophers. His most recent book, Why Machines Will Never Rule the World, Artificial Intelligence Without Fear, challenges prevailing assumptions about the future of AI and criticizes the idea that large language models could lead to artificial general intelligence. His contributions have been acknowledged with numerous prestigious awards, including the Wolfgang Paul Award from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and the Paolo Bozzi Prize for Ontology from the University of Turin. As we can see, Professor Smith brings a wealth of knowledge to today's discussion. His lecture will focus on a topic of critical importance and is titled My Life with ChatGPT. Following the lecture, we'll have a Q&A, the discussion and session, so I encourage you all to actively participate. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or raise your hand to ask them directly. And now, without further ado, I am pleased to hand the floor to our distinguished guest, Professor Barry Smith. Professor Smith, thank you so much for joining us today. We are honored to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paola. So actually, this is not a very good title because I already gave a talk with this title 2 years ago. And so now I'm trying to catch up with some of the things which happened in the last 2 years. And so Paola mentioned this book, and it was co-authored by a German AI entrepreneur who is a polymath, expert in many fields. And the reason that we wrote the book was the following. So he was running an AI startup company in Germany. It had customers who were using the AI tools that Jobst created, for instance, to provide replies automatically to letters relating to rental contracts and the like. So large real estate companies would use the software to save money on letter answering. Now, his customers were begging him all the time for the 15 years of this company to give them a chatbot so that they could deal not just with letters, but also with telephone calls. And that, as I'm sure you all know from your experiences talking to your bank, where the bank decides that you have to answer to a computer, not to a human being, there are no effective chatbots. And the attempt to create chatbots now goes back more than 50 years. And so Jobs decided that he needed to work out why there are no effective chatbots. And for whatever reason, he came to me. And we wrote this book together. Now I'm going to dive back a little bit into my life before ChatGPT. So I did spend quite a long period in my early life as a plain vanilla philosopher. And one of the areas where I worked was in Polish philosophy. So these are the publications on Polish philosophy or the translations into Polish of some of my publications on other topics. And you will see that there is one of these publications which is a sort of paradox. And if you're interested, you have to read this publication, or you can ask me in the questions at the end why I would publish a piece like this when I devoted so much time to working on Polish philosophy. So the wider background of all of this was my work on realist phenomenology. So those of you who don't know any philosophy, you should be aware that phenomenology was one of the 2 or 3 important schools of thought throughout the 20th century. And it was established in Munich and Göttingen. The person who established it was Edmund Husserl, and it had a Polish branch. So this group, round about 1910, moved or sent emissaries to Poland, of which the most important was a Roman Ingarden, and another one, a Karol Wojtyła, who is famous, I believe, for other reasons. And so I became one of the experts on this realist phenomenology, and I thereby also worked a lot on Ingarden and Wojtyła's philosophical ideas. All right, this will be relevant in a minute, you will see. So this book was published in November 22, and one of the topics that we dealt with in the book was, how could an AI be ethical? Now, in the end, we concluded that an AI tool cannot be ethical, but still we addressed the problem. And one of the candidates for an ethical theory, which might, we thought, be treated as being useful to AI, was indeed an ethical theory developed within this Munich, Göttingen, Poland school. And actually, it was based more than anywhere else in Krakow. And it's interesting because it's a small school, maybe 18, 20 people, but 2 of them were canonized. This is a very strange phenomenon, but it's a phenomenon which has some sort of ethical relevance. Because if we want to get data about ethical behavior to train an AI model, then presumably we should pick exemplars of maximally ethical behavior. And then Jesus would be a good example of maximally ethical behavior. And so in the book, we were trying to get a publisher to publish the book. And in the manuscript that we were using, we had a footnote, which was to the effect that we have a school of ethics, two of whose members were canonized, and that would perhaps be an interesting feature of the underlying theory when it comes to building an AI ethical tool. And one of the reviewers, she was a very, very positive reviewer. She liked the book a lot. She was responsible for the fact that the book was published, but she insisted that we delete this footnote. She thought it was just way, way, way outside the realm of science, that we should draw conclusions from the fact that 2 members of the school were canonized. Now, I'm sorry now that we deleted the footnote. I'm sure the publishers wouldn't have minded, but still, we did delete it. It showed a weakness of mind on our part. So, after working on biomedical ontology, I worked on applied ontology in general. And Paula mentioned that my work in that field has become somewhat important. It's used in the Defense Department, the intelligence community, the Department of Homeland Security. It's used in various international efforts to create interoperability between data systems. And Paula also mentioned, this is, I'll give you the English version in a minute. So this is the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. It has a section on AI and philosophy. And in this section, I realize I don't have the English version. In this section, they say that it's a scientifically significant event that for the first time in history, a piece of philosophy should be raised to the level of an ISO standard. And it was indeed a big change. Once the philosophy that we were working on at that time became an ISO standard, it did indeed become important to a whole series of industries, and it's becoming more important by the day because of artificial intelligence. And I will just explain very simply how ontology is related to artificial intelligence. As I think you know, as I hope you all know, the large language models such as ChatGPT that we are all playing with one way or another make mistakes. They hallucinate. And so people have been exploring ways in which they could stop the hallucinations. And one large family of programs along these lines involves using what are called knowledge graphs. So in other words, channels of giving real world knowledge to the large language model so that it will make fewer mistakes. And the knowledge graphs that people talk about are more than anything else knowledge graphs grounded in applied ontologies. And the ontologies that we build are particularly popular in certain circles because they have been built and used by so many different organizations. Okay. All right, now let's get to the hard stuff. We have various AI gods, such as Sam Altman and Elon Musk. And then we have various philosophers who hang around the coattails of the AI gods. And now in 2023, Elon Musk said that AI would equal the intelligence of human beings by the end of 2025. So he has only 8 months left, and they're in fact going downhill just at the moment. And then the idea was that because AI systems are more intelligent at some stage than human beings, they will be able to craft even more intelligent systems of artificial intelligence, which will lead to an exponential explosion, they say, which will before long take over the galaxy. It will almost certainly, they assume, dispense with human beings, and the world will be a world of AIs. Now, this is all nonsense, but very many people, and this is one of the reasons why we wrote the book, believe it. And the subtitle of the book is AI Without Fear, and this is Nick Bostrom's famous book on superintelligence, who describes AI research as a ticking time bomb because it's on the way to creating artificial general intelligence or even superintelligence, which would overwhelm human beings, take away all our jobs, eventually replace us completely by a much more super duper kind of intelligence that they would build. All right, so what we say is the following. There will never be machine intelligence which is more intelligent than human beings. There will never be machine autonomy. In other words, machines will never be able to make judgments of will. They will never be able to want anything. In particular, they will never be able to start a fight. And there will be no threat of this hyperbolic expansion of intelligence, and so also no need for efforts to ensure that AI is, as they say, safe or aligned with human goals or regulated by governments. These are superfluous. And the reason they're superfluous is because AI tools are nothing more than mathematical algorithms. Mathematical algorithms cannot be intelligent. They cannot know anything. They cannot have emotions. They cannot understand anything, because that's not what mathematical algorithms do. Now, as concerns AI ethics, we accept that you may indeed have AI-related ethical concerns, and that's only because some people will try to use ethics and they will have evil goals, and the ethics, so we'll try to use AI to support evil goals so that AI systems will become powerful weapons. Now, whether they will become powerful remains to be seen. But if we have some people who are using AI tools to achieve evil ends, that does not mean that the AI tools are ethical or unethical. Only that which can be responsible for behavior can be ethical or unethical. And a mathematical algorithm can't be responsible for anything. So talking about AI ethics is like talking about car ethics, because of course, cars can be used as dangerous tools. So can golf balls in principle, and certainly guns can be used as dangerous tools. But we don't talk about gun ethics, or at least we shouldn't talk about gun ethics. And similarly, we shouldn't talk about AI ethics. I imagine that there are some of you in the room now who are actually teaching or studying AI ethics. So I hope you will respond in the discussion and prove me wrong. All right, now there are also positive benefits of AI, many positive benefits. So the final chapter of our book is about these positive benefits. So AI tools can help us to counteract the threats from evil people. But it is still just a useful mathematical tool. It can't know anything, and so it can't know what is ethical or unethical. That decision will always have to be made in the end by a human being. All right, now technical terminology. What we have now is what is sometimes called narrow AI or weak AI. And narrow AI is AI which is designed to address specific tasks or specific problems. Now, the large language models address the specific task of working out what is the next token after a series of tokens, which might be, for instance, a series of tokens making up a request on the part of a user like you or me. So large language models supply tokens in response to requests, let's say, just to keep it simple, and they could provide sequences of tokens. Now, because your requests have a linguistic meaning to you, and because your requests are captured by very, very sophisticated mathematical models, the responses to your requests look as if the computer knows something. But in fact, all that the computer knows is contained in mathematical representations of stuff that was fed into it that was known by a human being or by many human beings, because by now all of the internet has been stuffed into the large language models. So it would appear that they know a lot, but in fact all they know is how to apply certain statistical algorithms to inputs which are binary vectors, and those binary vectors have been calculated on the basis of inputs in the form of sentences created by human beings such as you and me. Now, in this way, the large language models aim to replicate human intelligence, but they don't succeed in doing anything like that. All they succeed in doing is applying statistics to certain patterns in order to generate certain other patterns. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So, as I say, the final chapter of the book is devoted to showing how useful AI can be. We are not Luddites. We don't believe that we should stop using AI. On the contrary, it's going to be very, very important and make the world a better place. The problem is that at the moment, people are talking about AI and they're using all kinds of AI hype for reasons which I will explain at the end. Now, it's true that many jobs will change, but it's not true that AI will replace human beings. And jobs will not be eliminated. Some jobs will go, but they will then be compensated by other jobs, just as happened in every single step in the course of human evolution at least since the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. Modernization brings new kinds of jobs. It makes people richer and so forth. All right, now I wanted to talk about law enforcement robots because the dean who invited me to give this talk, I notice, has published on this topic. So the idea of using AI and law enforcement robots is addressed in the book. One of the features of this topic is that the robots that we have now are very, very, how can I put this, clumsy. That most of the robots which are in use at the moment are not movable robots. They don't move around through the world. They're stationary robots. For instance, doing paralegal work in a law office. And there they have a growing stock of algorithms which enables them to do legal work more intelligently, more quickly, more correctly. But then that's not what we mean when we talk about law enforcement robots. What we're talking about now is robot cops in the wild. Now, relying on narrow AI, because there is only narrow AI, could we have robot cops out in the world? Our answer is no. And one big reason for that is that the robots are no good. But I'm going to ignore that, that side of things. Robots get better, but they always seem to be moving incrementally. And the fear is it will plateau so that it will continue to improve in smaller and smaller increments, but without reaching the point where they can actually do things out in the wild of the sort that humans do. All right, so the first test case is the aggressive beggar. How could a robot cop help to solve this problem? And so the robot cop would need to be very sensitive to what is going on in the environment. In contrast to the paralegal robot or the paralegal AI working in a law office, where you can just rely on some sentences. Here we have to rely on the emotions of the beggar, on the reactions of the people that the beggar is trying to pester, of the potentiality of persuading the beggar to stop being aggressive, and so forth. And this is a complex scenario, and that means it's going to be very difficult for a narrow AI to deal with it, as we will see. So the argument is that in such complex scenarios, AI agents get lost. They can't predict, they can't feel, they themselves have no intentions. They can only respond to what's been pre-programmed in them by humans who had no idea of the scenario that they are now facing. They can't master social norms. So the social norm, for instance, that you shouldn't kill an aggressive beggar. It may be that they're preventing from killing anything, but they couldn't master the social norms involved. How far can you go in manhandling an aggressive beggar? All of these are problems which I believe we're nowhere towards solving. How do we deal with those problems? Well, we've grown up in a world with social norms. They've been drilled into us as children. We have empathy because we're human beings. We have empathy with other human beings. But most of all, we know how to use language. And here it may indeed be possible to persuade the beggar with language, but that would require a very, very powerful knowledge of language of the sort that humans are able to achieve. All right, so machines lack intersubjectivity. They do not have a will. They don't have a value system. And so they have nothing they can use to drive moral acts, except if particular scenarios are built into them statistically by training over a long time. But then these scenarios will only work in the simple cases. So there are many robots being used in factories, but they're nearly always stationary. They're tied to a table. And that's because non-stationary robot, these arms weigh a huge amount. And to have non-stationary robot arms moving around a factory, it turns out, is still too dangerous because they cause injuries to workers. All right, this is the paper I was referring to. And it's referring to crowd control. That's very, very difficult. more difficult than the aggressive beggar, I believe, for all the same reasons. I think this paper is very interesting because it identifies all kinds of ethical issues where robots can indeed solve problems which humans will face. For instance, robots can go and clear nuclear debris in a way which we wouldn't put humans in that situation. So there are very many interesting things in this paper, but I'm going to talk about police robots, not about robots doing ethically useful activities like this, but robots working with people. And now let me just explain why I think that crowd control would be a hard problem. So let's suppose we find a way of programming robots, robot cops, robots generally, to help humans, because they would have to have humans who were in charge, to help humans in crowd control. So we create the relevant algorithms, we use the relevant algorithms in crowd control, we refine them, they begin to work. And what happens? Immediately, crowd-forming groups over the world realize that there are robots using these and these algorithms for crowd control, and that means that they will change their tactics. Now, this is what is called model-induced escape. As soon as you introduce a new solution into a world where everyone has an iPhone, then people who want to overcome this problem will change their behavior. This is what happens with spam. So at the beginning, at least, of the spam explosion, Google developed a spam filter system which worked very well, but only for a time. And that's because the authors of spam find ways of getting around spam filters. And this is what would happen also with AI-driven right control. It would be a constant arms race between the rioters and the AI robot programmers. Let's look for a minute at robot police. This is not a robot here, it's a human being. So simple case is a traffic stop. Surely you would say a robot can deal with the simple phenomenon of a traffic stop. So we have sensors along the roads, a sensor detects someone speeding, and so a robot motorcycle police machine catches the car and somehow persuades the driver to stop. Maybe that's achievable mechanically. But then what happens next? So in the simple case, the driver allows herself to be subjected to questioning by the robot. And now the robot's algorithm has a series of categories of interaction between different people who are stopped in a traffic stop. So it may be that they were suspecting drugs and the suspicion was confirmed. It'd be hard, but the robot is able to search the car. The robot maybe has a robot dog which can smell. Or there's no driving license, or the person is drunk, or the person starts to fight back at the cop. These are standard situations. And then for each standard situation, the algorithm tells the robot what to do. Unfortunately, few situations would be simple. So everybody will have different unpredictable factors which are not taken care of. So it may be that the person in the car who's been who's been speeding is lying, or maybe they are mentally ill, or maybe they answer questions in a logically inconsistent way. And for whatever reason, humans know how to deal with those kinds of phenomena, but you can't program them all into an algorithm because there are unendingly many different combinations of predictors which fall outside the usual already categorized case types which have been programmed into the cop robot. Now, how is this? How is this? So the answer is that we survived as language using organisms over 8 million years in which the power of language is developed. Now, language makes it very easy for people to tell lies. And so language made the world more dangerous because we were not only surrounded by alien beings from a different tribe who were more powerful than us physically, we were also surrounded by people, even people within our own tribe, who were trying to trick us by cheating, by using words. And we learned to detect cheaters. We developed neurophysiologies of great complexity, which express themselves in our ability to understand language, not just in the one token after another way that the large language model studies the requests that we input into it, but in a way which grasps empathetically the intentions, the intuitions, the emotions, the risks associated with what a stranger is communicating to us with language in this particular situation. It took a long time for us to develop these capacities, but the capacities are amazingly powerful. And now these capacities enable humans to engage in dialogue safely with aggressive beggars, or with drunken speed drivers, or with any other of the kind of dangerous situations which we find during our lives. If we're a policeman, then we have enough aggressive energy and power to overcome, in many cases at least, the physical dangers in the world, but they have to overcome the linguistic dangers in the world. And that means they have to treat the subject of their interrogation in ways which conform to social norms and try and get by persuasion what otherwise would be achieved by violence. And to get someone who wants to do something bad to not do that bad thing by persuasion involves 8 million years worth of linguistic powers. And we have these, the fact that we have these linguistic powers is illustrated by the fact that when we meet a stranger, the first thing we do is we talk about each other. We want to know where they come from, what they believe, what they want to do, and so forth. And we do all of this to determine that they are not dangerous, that they are trustworthy. And we can detect trustworthiness with a very high degree of success by exchanging tidbits about our respective lives. And we do this because when we encounter strangers, we have to find out whether they are dangerous. And that's how come we can pass the Turing test. So if we are behind a screen and the trick is to find out whether the entity behind the screen is a human or a computer, we would always win. We would always be able to persuade the people who are interrogating us on the outside that we are in fact human beings and not computers. The computer in the reverse situation is not able to do that, particularly not if we have a vocal dialogue rather than just a written dialogue, because it's vocal language where this empathetic knowing how dimension comes into play. And just to repeat, this is because every AI model is a piece of mathematics. And a piece of mathematics cannot want, will, or desire, cannot have empathy, cannot, for instance, engage in a conversation with a bank customer because it doesn't have the empathy to deal with a human being in a vocal interaction. All right, now the main theses are complex systems, which are nearly all the systems in the universe, including every organism, your brain, your heart. They have what we call evolutionary properties. I'll give you some more examples of such properties in a minute. Systems with these properties can't be modeled mathematically in predictive ways. This is the standard textbook on the mathematics of complex systems that you see here on the right. And what this means is that systems with such properties can't be emulated inside a computer. That's why we can't emulate the human brain in a computer in a way which would create artificial general intelligence. And now a system is just a totality of dynamically interrelated elements. So a family is a system. The air is a system of molecules, for instance. And some of these systems are simple systems, or what we call logic systems, because we can predict their behavior using Newtonian mathematics and logic. So the solar system, treated as a simple gravity system, every artifact made by engineering is a simple system. And until it breaks down. So the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was a simple system until it was mishandled by human beings. And now it's a complex system, along with all biological systems, the weather, the climate, the earthquakes, and so on. These are all complex, which means that, as we all know, and we can't predict them. If we could predict the New York Stock Exchange, we'd all be rich. All right, now, some features of complex systems, they change their types. So in simple systems, the elements always keep the same type. In complex systems, elements can change their type in time. There are several forces acting on them which create imbalances. There is no equilibrium state, and there are no boundaries because they have evolutionary properties. Now, every conversation is a complex system. So you are talking to your friends, and suddenly one of you, and everybody is friendly and happy and so forth, and suddenly one of these friends, who's an element in the system called the conversation, becomes really angry, and he changes his type, and the forces which he's exerting on the conversation are changing at the same time. And there's definitely no equilibrium state. The conversation has become very unstable, and there are no fixable boundaries, because some people could run away and continue the conversation amongst themselves and so forth. The conversation could become about the conversation, or it could be about how the conversation might be in 3 years' time, and so on. There are all kinds of ways in which conversations can fail to be predictable. Then there is the problem of starting a conversation. So these two louts have been sitting here for an hour, and then suddenly one of them says, "Shall we play chess?" I know it's not a really good example, but let's stick with this example. A computer could never start a game of chess. A human could program a computer to make this request, play chess, every 3 hours. If he sees people who've been sitting for 3 hours without doing anything, it would have to disguise itself in such a way that the person would understand why the computer was approaching him in this way. But all of that would have to be programmed by a human. Computers cannot start to do anything. They can't start to do physics unless they've been programmed to do physics by a human. And that's because, again, they can't want anything. They have no will. And now another problem is that because computers are so unpredictable, there's no way to get a representative sample set of data about conversations that you could use to train an AI model. So this is why bank tellers fail. They have no empathy and they have no agency. If a customer asks a human bank teller, can the bank do this or that? And this is not on the list of things for which the robot has a stock answer, then the robot will give an answer that will not satisfy the customer. A human would give an answer. And that is one of many ways in which computable bank tellers fail to please, serve, behave appropriately with human beings. And now, I said this already, to engage successfully in a conversation, you have to want something from the conversation. to take over the planet from human beings, you'd have to want something from that, and they don't want anything. Now, I have here a brief account of how machine learning works. I've been hinting all the way so far. So the first thing you do is to collect sample data about your target domain. Then you use mathematics to identify patterns. And then you use those patterns to predict patterns in other segments of the target domain, for instance, in the future of the target domain. So you collect lots of data about the weather, you identify mathematical patterns, and then you can use those patterns to predict the weather in 2 or 3 days' time. You can't predict the weather in the next year or in 10 years, of course. And this is how the machine learning works. And we already saw that there's a spam filter problem, the fact that as soon as you use an AI like this, it will start to behave in ways which will trick you. And that happened with ChatGPT, of course. I know, because after ChatGPT was released, lots of people were saying, oh, ChatGPT will be artificial general intelligence within 6 months or very soon, or already is. And so I was desperately trying to prove that ChatGPT was still stupid. And so I wanted to find ways in which I could show that it was not predicting patterns in the future segments of this domain by giving it trick questions. Now, what the previous slide shows is that there is a myth of scaling. The idea is that Sam Altman and co. believed sincerely in a doctrine according to which all we need is just more and more and more data, and then we'll get to AGI. But now we know, and in the book we said already, even before ChatGPT, that mere quantity of data is not enough. For scaling to work, the sample data must have the same distribution as the entire target domain. This is a statistical restraint or constraint, which is very hard to achieve in areas like conversation or weather or earthquakes or whatever you like in the realm of complex systems. So this is a very simple distribution. These are distributions based on the bell curve to the left of distributions with differing variance. Now, sample data almost always has differing variance from the data across the whole target domain, which means that it's very hard to find sample data which will work to create predictions without making mistakes. And in some domains, of course, it's impossible to make predictions without making mistakes. Otherwise, we would all be rich because we would make predictions about the stock market. All right, so the human mind is irregular, it's a complex system. We'll never have representative sample data, therefore we'll never train an AI model that can predict the behavior of the brain. So solar system is an example of a simple system. An artifact is an example of a complex system. Every self-driving car is a logic system, a simple system in our terminology. Its model is updated at regular intervals because every one of these models makes mistakes because they're simple systems. And in the real world, traffic is a complex system. And so gradually it gets better and better. It gets to be a close match to traffic reality in Arizona or somewhere where traffic is very well behaved and limited and so forth. And now they can even do it in San Francisco. So San Francisco has very complex traffic, but every stage will still be an experimental stage because there will still be things we can't predict. And so $100 billion have been invested in self-driving cars. So we have thriving self-driving taxi services in San Francisco, except that we don't because Cruise pulled out because it just didn't work. And Waymo and Zoox they've not pulled out, but they're still constantly encountering problems. But in any case, we are not dealing with self-driving cars. Every single one of those cars is being monitored by humans in a remote location. And sending control inputs to the cars. And of course, it has to be this way because there are so many ways in which new, funny, unexpected things can happen to cars, self-driving cars, which wreck the software, because the software is a simple system. The software in every artifact is a simple system. And the traffic in any city is a complex system, not least because every city has teenagers who like to play games with driverless cars in order to make them perform badly. And there's no way of predicting the behavior of teenage boys. All right, so that's to summarize what I just said. And so November the 9th, Gary Marcus, who is a hero of mine because he keeps track of all the scandals and problems of ChatGPT and so forth. And so the improvements are slowing down. We're plateauing. Hallucinations are still not under control. And this came out yesterday. Only 1/5 of AI buyers are getting good results. And so companies are increasing spending on AI, but they aren't necessarily getting much of a return on their investment. And now I have 3 more minutes. So I thought that the hallucination problem was getting to be a smaller and smaller problem. I'll give you an example of how things were in 2023, when I was still panicking to find crazy hallucinations. So the Urner Loch is a hole in the ground in Switzerland. It was dug for the sake of the Gotthard Tunnel. It's just a hole in Urn. And so I asked ChatGPT 3.5, as it was then, what is the Urner Loch? And it said, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure which specific Urner Loch you want. So one possible reference is to the Urner Lochschaft in Switzerland. It is a district that encompasses the valleys of Schechental and Urseren. And the name Urner Lochschaft literally means the district of the Uri Valley. It doesn't. It just means a hole. It doesn't mean a district. Another reference is the Urner Loch cave in Austria. There is no such cave. And so it says, can you provide more information on the specific Urner Loch you're referring to? And I asked it for more information. It gave me this. Urner Lochschaft encompasses these valleys. It's characterized by rugged mountain terrain. One of the most famous attractions is the Klausen Pass. Remember, the Urner Lochschaft doesn't exist apart from this hole. It certainly does not contain a whole valley and connect other valleys. And it's not in a popular destination for hikers, bikers, and motorists because it's just a hole in the ground halfway up a mountain. There are no hikers, bikers, or motorists there. And it has all kinds of other notable attractions. There's a town inside the hole, and it's the source of a river, and it's a ski area, and so on. There are pages and pages of tourist information about a hole. This is all just lying. And so ChatGPT 3 was really bad. ChatGPT 4 was making fewer mistakes. And ChatGPT Turbo in 2024 was making, but you see, it's plateauing. And now what will be next? And so Gary Marcus says that what we're going to get is worse results because all of these tourist guides, which are full of nonsense, are going to enshitify, which means fill with shit, the internet. But so I thought it was okay, but then yesterday I tried again Urner Lochschaft just for fun, and Google said there are no results for Urner Lochschaft. But ChatGPT invented a whole new social organization phenomenon called Urner Lochschaft, a communal alpine cooperation in the canton of Uri. These types of institutions were part of traditional alpine common systems in central Switzerland. And this is all nonsense. It's made up nonsense. And with that, I rest my case.